Welcome to the Wife Stories YouTube channel. New video every day, and don't forget to subscribe. Here we go.
Did you ever think you'd watch your wife slip into the bathroom, lock the door behind her, and realize you no longer recognize the woman you married? I'm sitting on the edge of our bed, listening to the faint rush of water behind that thin wooden barrier. The air in the room is cold, stale somehow, as though the vent gave up weeks ago. Outside, it's near midnight. Lights from the street throw jagged shapes across the curtains. I can still hear her muffled sobs echoing through the pipes. She probably thinks I can't hear them, that the steady hiss of the shower hides her tears, but in this silence, every breath, every sigh is amplified. The strangest part is, I'm calm, perfectly still, a statue in the dark, recalling every moment that led us here. We weren't always like this. We had normal problems. Mortgage payments, minor quarrels over the color of the bedroom walls, the usual friction of two adults learning to share one life. I used to write occasional magazine pieces and do some freelance journalism gigs. She had her marketing job in a small agency. We were never wealthy, but we managed. We were a team, or so I thought. Over the last year, though, I noticed a shift. A coldness, an invisible wedge creeping into the bed each night. She moved away from my side, started calling me hey or just you, as if my name took too much effort to pronounce. I kept telling myself it was work stress or midlife fatigue, but deep down I sensed something else. It all began to come undone the morning after our little car accident. It happened 3 months ago. We'd been heading to a local diner for breakfast, some weekend treat to break the monotony. Pancakes, coffee, the usual. She was driving, and I was half distracted, scrolling through my phone, when the truck ahead of us slammed on its brakes at an intersection. She tried to stop in time, but the tires screeched, and the front end of our car banged into the truck's bumper. It wasn't a massive crash, not the sort that shatters bones or flips vehicles over, but it was jarring enough that our airbags exploded in our faces. My ears rang as if a bomb had gone off, and I could taste the acrid smell of burnt chemicals from the airbag's deployment. I remember blinking, stunned, heart pounding, until her voice cut through the haze. "My dear, are you okay?" She yelled, her hands shaking so badly she could hardly undo her seatbelt. My own ears were buzzing, but I heard the words clearly. My dear. She hadn't used that phrase for me in months. Maybe a year. It felt foreign, jarring, as if she'd aimed those words at someone else entirely. When I turned my head to look at her, I saw her eyes wide with panic, scanning me for cuts or bruises, and something in me froze. If I'm honest, it felt almost mocking. The sudden rush of endearment from the same lips that treated me so carelessly lately. We stepped out of the car, confirmed the truck driver was fine. Then we waited for the police to show up, do the routine check. She kept saying, "My dear, it's all right, don't worry," while patting my shoulder awkwardly, like a performance. I pretended not to notice. There was no real damage, beyond a bent bumper, but inside me, something had cracked. For months, she could barely say my name. Then, in a moment of panic, she used a phrase that implied deep tenderness. But it sounded false. And I thought, who was she thinking about just then? Was she mixing me up with someone else, someone she'd been calling my dear in private? I didn't confront her at the scene. There was no point in making a public spectacle. Instead, I just nodded and answered the paramedics' questions. Eventually, we got a tow for the car, took a cab home, and that was the end of it. Except it wasn't, because from that day on, I couldn't shake the suspicion. I started noticing every odd phone call she received, every text she hid from me. I sensed a tension in her that wasn't there before. She thought she was good at covering her tracks, that her sly glances at the screen went unnoticed. But I saw everything. Late one night, about a week after the accident, she stepped out to pick up groceries. Normally, she'd just go after work or have me come along. But this time, she insisted on going alone at 10:30 p.m., Something in my gut churned. I grabbed my coat and followed a few minutes later, maintaining a careful distance. My heart hammered as I turned corners, headlights off. There's a sick thrill in that kind of pursuit, but also a dread that seeps into your bones. She didn't go to the supermarket. She drove to a loft building downtown, a place I'd never seen her visit. She parked, got out, glanced around as if she knew she should be careful, then slipped into a side entrance. I pulled up a bit further down the block and waited. My mouth was dry, my head pounding. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Then I told myself, enough. Just look. See. Don't guess. Don't imagine. Observe the truth. I killed the engine, walked quietly to the side door, and found it unlocked. Old building, obviously. She hadn't even thought to lock it behind her. Inside was a dark hallway, faint music drifting down from somewhere above. My palms were slick with sweat, and I remember the old stale smell of cigarette smoke. There was an elevator, but the sign read out of order, so I started up the concrete stairs. On the second landing, I heard voices. Her voice, a man's voice, low, almost a purr. Then a short laugh I recognized from our early days, back when she was happy and carefree. I think I stopped breathing. I followed that sound to a door left ajar. I peered in. It was a small loft space, mostly open, with thick wooden beams overhead. The lights were dim, but I could see them clearly enough. She was there, leaning against a kitchen island, wine glass in hand, laughing in a way she hadn't laughed around me in months. Next to her stood a tall, lean man with a short beard and dark, intense eyes. He wore jeans, a half-open shirt, showing a glimpse of a sculpted chest. He took her glass, set it aside on the counter, then slid his arms around her waist with practiced ease. She didn't resist. Instead, she let her head fall back, sighing softly. I felt my stomach plunge. That unspoken confirmation left me rooted in place. There was an unmistakable intimacy between them, as if they'd done this many times before. She whispered something in his ear. I heard him chuckle in that smooth, confident way. Then, without missing a beat, he lifted her onto that counter, parted her knees with his hand, and leaned in to kiss her throat. My own throat constricted so tight, I thought I might pass out from lack of air. For a moment, it was as though time itself halted. I couldn't move, couldn't think. I watched her fingers slide over his shoulders and disappear under his shirt collar. It wasn't just the physical act that gutted me. There was a softness in her face, an affection in her eyes. She used to look at me like that, once upon a time. Now that tenderness was turned toward a stranger. At least, a stranger to me. He obviously was not a stranger to her. My first instinct was to storm in, confront them, maybe even start swinging. But something else held me back, an overwhelming surge of humiliation. They were so absorbed in each other that the world outside didn't exist. And I realized I'd been replaced in her mind, in her arms, possibly in her heart. Still, I forced myself to step back, to retreat down the stairs as quietly as I come. My cheeks burned, my hands were clenched in fists, but I swallowed the impulse to destroy the scene. Rage ran hot through my veins, yet I felt strangely numb at the same time. I drove home on autopilot, parked a few blocks away, just in case she returned before me. When I opened the door to our house, my chest felt tight. The emptiness of the living room, the dim glow of the lamp we always left on in the corner. It all felt staged, like a set piece in a life that no longer existed. I sank onto the couch and waited, the night stretching in suffocating silence. She came in an hour later, grocery bag in hand, a plastic bag containing a carton of milk and some eggs. She set it on the kitchen counter and avoided my eyes. "They were out of half the stuff," she muttered, as if that explained her prolonged absence. I looked at her, studying the smudges of faded mascara under her eyes, the flush on her cheeks. She wouldn't meet my gaze, and that was all I needed to confirm it. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and headed to the bedroom, locked the door behind me. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, reliving the scene in my mind over and over. The way he touched her, the way she responded. I couldn't quell the roiling in my gut, the fury, the misery, the sense of complete inadequacy. If you've never experienced that primal stab of betrayal, you can't imagine how it hollows you out. And yet, I kept it together on the outside. I wasn't the type to scream or break furniture, or maybe I just lacked the strength to show it. The days that followed turned into a slow burn of tension. She knew something was off, but I played it calm. We went through the motions of our daily routines, as if everything were fine. She'd watch TV in the living room. I'd retreat to my desk in the spare bedroom and stare blankly at my notes. That's when I started writing. At first, it was random paragraphs, bits of dialogue, a vague storyline about a wife who secretly feeds another man, while her husband stands by in tortured silence. Each page burned with the anger I wouldn't say aloud. I poured everything into that story, shaping the characters to mirror our lives. A husband who sees too much, a wife who tries to hide the truth even from herself, and a cunning lover who offers her excitement she can't find at home. It was therapy in a twisted sense. I titled it, ironically, My Dear, just to remind myself how hollow those words had sounded in the car. That manuscript was the only place I let my emotions run wild. In person, I was cordial to her, even polite. We'd eat dinner together in near silence. She'd ask generic questions about my day, and I'd give short, almost courteous replies. I was biding my time, letting the tension coil inside me like a spring. Then came the night she discovered my secret writing. I'd foolishly left the document open on my laptop, thinking she was already asleep. I went to take a shower, and when I returned, she stood in the office, eyes flicking across the screen, mouth parted in shock. She looked up at me, horror mingling with shame in her expression. But what frightened her most, I think, was the realization that it wasn't just that I knew. I understood. I understood the dynamics, her dissatisfaction, the malicious thrill she found in that affair. She realized I'd watched from the shadows, and that I was dissecting our marriage like a patient under the scalpel. She gasped, tears forming in her eyes. "Why would you?" I raised a hand. "Don't." Her lips trembled, and for a moment I wondered if she would break down, beg forgiveness. Instead, she closed the laptop and walked past me, shoulders stiff, eyes blazing with resentment. She mumbled something about an invasion of her privacy, about how I dared to write such personal things. But I didn't respond, because all the words I wanted to say were already typed in that manuscript. Let her read them if she wished. Let her see that each page was a testament to my quiet fury. For the next week, we lived like strangers passing in a hallway, rarely speaking. She slept in the guest bedroom some nights, claiming she needed space. I didn't stop her. I'd lie awake, thinking about how she was probably texting him beneath the covers, making plans. At times, I wondered if I'd fallen into some parallel universe where my wife, the woman who once confided her every fear and dream in me, had become a cunning stranger. The tension spilled over into our social life. We have neighbors, acquaintances we used to have barbecues with, friendly dinners, the occasional holiday party. Some of them had seen the way she snapped at me in recent months, how she'd grown sharp-edged, ready to twist every conversation into an argument. They also saw me retreat into silence, try to ask if everything was all right. I never gave them details, just a polite shrug. But now, I felt a new sense of purpose. Let her see how it feels when the narrative flips. I started confiding in them, not with direct accusations, but with carefully planted questions. Have you ever noticed how she complains I'm too controlling, that I watch her every move? I'd ask in a puzzled tone. You think maybe it's the other way around? Ever notice how she's always checking her phone, or how she's so secretive about where she goes? Little seeds of doubt. They took root. People love gossip, especially when they see cracks in a couple that once seemed stable. Word spread among our small circle. She picked up on the change almost immediately, because our friends began treating her differently, more cautious, more uncertain. She confronted me one morning while I was pouring coffee. "Why are you telling people lies about me?" she demanded, eyes red from either anger or tears. I sipped my coffee, feigning indifference. "What did I lie about? I've only shared my perspective. Isn't that what you do? Share your perspective, that I'm too clingy or too controlling." Figured I'd balance the story. Her hands shook. You don't understand what you're doing." I set down the mug. "Maybe not, but neither did you." She stared, her face contorted. She wanted to lash out, but she couldn't quite find the words. She turned on her heel and stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. Moments later, I heard muffled sobs. Once, that would have broken me, made me rush to console her. Now it only gave me a grim satisfaction. I discovered a new side of myself. An angry, vindictive side, perhaps, but also a side that refused to be a doormat anymore. If she was determined to undermine our marriage, I would no longer protect her from the consequences. The next morning, she announced she needed to clear her head and left the house early. I didn't bother to follow her this time. Instead, I returned to my writing, determined to finish the final chapters of my manuscript. I wanted it all out. The ugly details, the knowledge that the husband has of the wife's betrayal, the lover's easy confidence, the quiet torment that can drive a man insane. I typed with fury, each keystroke a catharsis. Then, in a twist of fate, my phone vibrated with a call from one of the neighbors. She'd seen my wife in tears, claiming I was stalking her, that I was making her life hell. "I'm worried about you both," the neighbor said. "This is getting serious." I just sighed, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. "She can say what she likes," I answered, "but be careful believing every word she says. There's more to the story." Later, I saw that same neighbor in person. She looked troubled, searching my eyes for the truth. "Is it real? What's she saying?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, it's real. But it's probably not what you think. She might claim I'm watching her, chasing her around. If anything, it's her who's been slipping away into other arms." I tried to ignore it, but a man can only swallow so much. Now, I'm done hiding. I could practically see the shift in the neighbor's eyes. The subtle pity, the confusion, the sense that something bigger was playing out. She patted my arm, gave me a sympathetic nod, and walked off. Let that rumor swirl around. Let my wife scramble to do damage control. Eventually, the day of final reckoning came. It started innocently enough. I'd been out to buy a new car with the insurance money from the crash. I tried to keep everything practical, just another box on my to-do list. I was still in the dealership when my phone buzzed with a text. From him, the lover. I'd once spied the number on her phone. I recognized it. The text read, "Need to talk. Meet me outside your place in an hour." My heart hammered. So he wanted to confront me. Maybe he had grown tired of lurking in the shadows. I drove home, adrenaline surging. My mind raced with possible scenarios. When I arrived, he was indeed there, leaning against a sleek black car parked along the curb. Even in that tense moment, I noticed how immaculately he was groomed. From the crisp lines of his shirt to the slight curl in his short, dark hair, he looked confident, almost smug. I stepped out of my car, locked it behind me. He folded his arms. "I'm Marco," he said, tone cautious yet firm. "We need to talk." I approached, hands loose at my sides. "Go ahead." He shifted, glanced around to ensure the neighbors weren't eavesdropping. "She told me you've been threatening her, spreading rumors." He paused. "I don't want any trouble, man. I understand you're upset." I stared at him, letting his words hang in the afternoon air. Threatening her. The nerve. "All I've done is stop pretending everything's normal," I replied. "And you want to talk about trouble? You made your bed the moment you stepped into my marriage." He exhaled, stepping forward. "Look, I didn't plan on this going so far. Things just happened. We both felt something. Maybe you two drifted apart. Don't blame me for what she wanted. My blood boiled, but I forced myself to stay composed. This was my moment to show him, and her, that I wasn't going to crumble. I'm not here to assign blame. But you come onto my property, spin some sob story, and expect me to let it go. I've lived with her for 10 years. I know exactly what's in her head, better than you do. A flicker of doubt crossed his face. She's convinced me you're dangerous. I let out a soft, humorless laugh. You have no idea what dangerous looks like. He stood there, uncertain. I just want to make sure she's not being hurt. My jaw tightened. She's free to leave any time she wants. She's been free to see you, hasn't she? I'm not locking her in a basement. But don't you dare come here and talk to me like I'm the villain. His eyes narrowed. Then what are you? Wronged, I said simply. But if you think I'm going to make a scene right now, you're mistaken. We stood in silence for a long moment. Finally, he shook his head, as if struggling with some internal debate. You know, she told me you used to be a decent guy. Now all she sees is a ghost who sits in the corner typing. Maybe try fighting for her if you still care. Those words felt like a slap, yet they also stirred an unexpected calm. If she wanted me to fight, I said, she shouldn't have destroyed what we had. He gave a final nod, as if conceding the point, then got into his car and drove off. I watched him until he disappeared. My heart hammered, but not from fear. From a sense of finality. It was as though we'd stared across a battlefield, each acknowledging the other, and now the lines were drawn clearly. I had no illusions about winning her back. The illusions were gone the moment I watched them in that loft. That evening, she came home. Her eyes were swollen with tears, but her face was a mask of defiance. I sat on the couch, arms crossed. She stood near the door, not bothering to remove her shoes. We regarded each other with a tension so thick, it weighed on the air. Marco says you threatened him, she began, voice shaky. I shrugged. No threats. He approached me. I listened. She swallowed. He's worried you'll do something reckless. I let out a slow breath, trying to keep my anger in check. Reckless would have been what I wanted to do when I saw you two together. I chose not to. Maybe you should be grateful. She took a couple of steps closer, tears glistening on her lashes. Don't act like I'm just some monster. You never tried to talk to me. You were always so wrapped up in your own world. Your writing, your silence. I needed something else. My jaw clenched. And you found it in his bed. She flinched, a single tear streaking down her cheek. It wasn't like that in the beginning. We connected over our work. I was doing marketing for his designs. We got close. I realized I was lonely, okay? Lonely, I repeated softly. I've been sleeping next to you for a decade. Did you ever say you were lonely? Or did you just assume I'd figure it out by osmosis? She bit her lip, voice trembling. You don't get it. You were always distant. I stood up, cutting her off. Don't turn this on me. I'm done with excuses. She broke then, sobs shaking her shoulders. Her tears, her raw heartbreak spilled out like I'd rarely seen before. In the past, I would have wrapped her in my arms, promised to fix whatever was broken. This time, I stayed put. Inside, I was bracing myself against her tears, refusing to let them melt my anger. Finally, she managed to speak through her sobs. I'm so sorry. Are you? I asked quietly. Because you're not telling me you want me. You're telling me you're sorry you got caught. There's a difference. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, as if unable to form the words. I waited. Silence pulsed between us. The next moment, the tension became too much, and she fled toward the bedroom, tears still streaming. The door slammed shut. Part of me wanted to chase her, to demand an explanation, to force the truth out of her. But a bigger part realized it wouldn't matter anymore. We'd reached a point of no return, a place where trust was irreversibly shattered. All that was left was the how of it, how we'd dismantle our life together. During the following weeks, we lived in a strange limbo. She insisted she had ended things with Marco. She claimed she wanted to salvage the marriage, but the sincerity in her eyes flickered like a weak bulb about to burn out. I gave her space, but also refused to coddle her. I left my manuscript in plain view, if she cared to read more. I continued talking with neighbors, not overtly, but enough that she knew her narrative had competition. Then, one fateful Sunday, we tried to go out for a drive again. An echo of that earlier morning. Maybe we both wanted to see if we could fix something by pretending normalcy. She got behind the wheel. I took the passenger seat. Part of me was still traumatized by the last accident, a subconscious dread. But we pulled away from the curve, heading nowhere in particular. The quiet between us was so heavy, I could hardly breathe. We reached a busy intersection with a flashing red light. She started inching forward, then abruptly, a speeding car slammed its brakes right next to us, squealing tires. She shrieked, twisting the wheel too sharply. We swerved, clipped another car's bumper. It was a minor collision, barely a jolt, but the memory of the previous crash came flooding back. She shouted, "Oh God," and braked hard. My seatbelt locked, pinning me in place. The adrenaline spike made my stomach churn. She slammed both hands on the steering wheel, tears brimming in her eyes. "Why does this keep happening?" she cried. "Why are we always?" Her voice broke. I reached over to steady the gear shift, forcibly prying her fingers away from the wheel. She looked at me as though seeing me for the first time in months. "Are you okay?" she whispered in a trembling voice. For a split second, I saw genuine concern there. I nodded. "I'm fine." But inside, I wasn't sure what I felt. Anger, heartbreak, longing, or just numbness. We got out, checked the other driver. No serious damage. We exchanged insurance info, apologized. The entire scene was a hollow replay of the first crash, except now there was no mask on either of us. Everyone was physically unharmed, but I could practically taste the bitterness in the air. When we drove back home, she shut off the engine in the driveway and buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly. I stared at her slender shoulders trembling, remembering a time I used to kiss away her tears. I felt empty, as though part of me had died in that cramped loft when I saw her in another man's arms. "You can go take a shower," I said quietly. "Calm yourself." She nodded, words failing her. She slipped out of the car and hurried inside, tears still streaming. That's how we ended up here, her behind the closed bathroom door, me on the bed, listening to the water run. I hear the shower knob squeak. She must be turning it off. A few more moments pass, footsteps on the tile. She emerges in a bathrobe, hair damp, eyes puffy. She hovers in the doorway, as though she can't decide if she's allowed to enter our bedroom. I study her face, the curve of her cheeks, the lines of tension between her brows. She clears her throat. "I'm sorry for everything," she whispers. I don't know how to fix this." My body feels heavy, as if my muscles have turned to stone. "Maybe it's not fixable," I reply evenly. "Maybe we've both gone too far." Her eyes well up with tears again. "I do love you. She trails off, hugging herself. The robe slips a bit, revealing the hollow at her collarbone. I wonder if that's where he used to press his lips. I don't bother looking away. "Don't do that," I say, more sharply than intended. She looks confused. "Do what?" Pretend everything can be undone with a few tears and half-finished sentences. She shakes her head, fresh tears spilling over. "I'm not pretending. I wish I could take it back." "Which part?" I ask, voice rough. "The affair, the lying, the fact that I caught you." She turns her face aside. "Please stop. I can't stand hearing it." I let out a bitter exhale. "That's too bad, because it's our reality." She stands there, hugging herself, tears sliding down her cheeks. I recall the day I proposed to her, how she cried with joy then. how her face lit up with promise. It's a brutal contrast. For a moment, my resolve cracks, and I wonder if there's a chance, a tiny, desperate hope, that we could rebuild. But the memory of her with him on that counter, the raw intimacy in her eyes, is etched into my mind like a scar. I rise from the bed. She flinches, but I simply walk to the closet and pull out a small suitcase. I place it on the bed, open it. My heart hammers so loud, I'm sure she can hear it. I begin methodically folding some clothes, stacking them inside. Her voice trembles. "What are you doing?" "Packing," I say. "I can't stay here." She moves closer, panic in her voice. "Wait, where will you go?" I pause, looking at her. "I don't know yet. A hotel, maybe. Doesn't matter. I can't keep sleeping under the same roof, hearing you cry in the next room, feeling like a stranger in my own home." Her eyes brim with tears. "Please, I can change. I can make things right." The sincerity in her tone tugs at me, but I steel myself. We both know it's too late. She steps forward, grabbing my arm with surprising strength. "Don't do this," she pleads. Her tearful face glistens. "Don't leave me alone." I stare down at her hand on my arm. Slowly, I peel her fingers away. "You've been alone for a while," I murmur, "or at least that's what you believed. You let me drift away and reached for someone else. If that's what you wanted, fine. It's done." Her lips part in a silent sob. "I'm sorry." I nod, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I know." I resume packing, each item of clothing feeling heavier than the last. She slumps onto the bed, hugging herself, her robe parted enough to show a faint bruise near her hip, maybe from the seatbelt in the accident. I find myself oddly detached, observing it with a clinical eye, like a man assessing someone else's problem. After I zip the suitcase, I pick it up and walk toward the door. She scrambles to her feet, tries to intercept me. "At least talk to me," she sobs. I look at her, the woman who's been so many things to me: friend, lover, partner, betrayer. A swirl of memories flickers through my head. "I wrote it all down," I say softly. "If you want to understand, read the story." She crumples, tears streaming. I step around her. In the hallway, I feel my heart pounding out of my chest. Each step is agony, but it's also strangely liberating. I remember how it felt to see her with him, how powerless I was. Now I'm reclaiming my power in the only way left, by walking away. Downstairs, I pause in the living room. The lamp glows in the corner, just as it did that first night I waited for her to come home from the loft. 1,000 thoughts swarm my mind. Where will I go? How will I move forward? But there's also a visceral sense of calm, a realization that my greatest fear, her betrayal, has come true, and somehow I'm still breathing. It's like surviving a storm that tears your roof away. Once you see the sky overhead, raw and endless, you realize you can't be destroyed by the same winds that once threatened you. I open the door, step out into the crisp night. The air feels sharp in my lungs, and the darkness is oddly comforting. As I load my suitcase into the trunk, I sense a figure at the door. I glance back. She's standing there in the entryway, clutching her robe tight, tears shining on her face. For a second, I consider going back, wiping those tears away, telling her we'll try again. But then I recall how she named me "my dear" during the crash, how that phrase felt so false and forced, how it was never really meant for me. I exhale, get into the car, and pull away. Driving through the empty streets, my mind wanders to the neighbors, the gossip, the half-truths that will circulate. I don't care. Let them talk. Let them piece together their theories. I know the truth, and that's all that matters. My phone vibrates on the passenger seat. I glance at it. A text from a friend, maybe, or from one of the neighbors. I ignore it for now, focusing on the road ahead. Eventually, I find a small motel on the outskirts. A flickering neon sign advertising weekly rates. I park, haul my suitcase inside, pay for a room with a wad of crumpled bills. The clerk gives me a sympathetic nod, as if he's seen men like me before, eyes hollow, shoulders tense, wearing a haunted expression that only heartbreak can carve. In the motel room, everything smells faintly of bleach. The walls are a sickly shade of green. I drop my suitcase onto the bed, rub my face with both hands. My ears are ringing with silence, the same silence I once endured at home. But here, it feels different. Here, it's solitude, not rejection. I take out my laptop. For a moment, I stare at the screen, the document icon for My Dear shining back at me. I could open it, revise it, maybe write a new ending. But instead, I close the laptop and set it aside. I need to breathe, to just be present with my thoughts. Everything I needed to say, I already said in those pages. Strangely, a numb relief settles over me. I think about how fear once dictated my every step. Fear of losing her, fear of facing the truth. Now that I've lost what I assumed was the most important thing, there's an odd freedom in that emptiness. The pain is there, burning in my chest, but it's tempered by a quiet sense of clarity. If she's truly gone from my life, then there's nothing left to lose. The tension of that question, is she cheating? Does she love me? Is replaced by certainty, no matter how brutal. I sit down on the bed, letting out a slow breath. The lamp beside me flickers, giving the room a kind of cheap, cinematic feel. I remember how she used to say we were like two leads in a romantic comedy, except the comedy part never really manifested. Now, it's more like a grim drama that ended in heartbreak and grim satisfaction. I run a hand through my hair, stand up, and walk to the window. The parking lot stretches out under harsh fluorescent lights. A few trucks, a single minivan, a black sedan, maybe a traveling salesman, maybe someone else fleeing a broken home. My reflection in the glass looks older, lines in my face sharper, new tension around the eyes. But I also see a glint of something, resolve. I survived this. I'll survive what comes next. I wonder if, in time, I'll finish the story with a different perspective. Maybe I'll gather the shattered pieces of my life into something that resembles healing. But that's for another day. For now, I'm content to stare into the night, letting the dust settle. She's probably still in our house, sobbing, or calling up Marco to blame him for the chain of events, or maybe cursing me for not forgiving her. I don't know, and I can't let it matter anymore. Let her figure out her regrets. I have to focus on my own next step. A part of me wants to text her, to say something final. But I resist. Words have power, and right now, the greatest power I have is silence. I'm done calling, done pleading, done caring how the story ends from her side. If she reads my manuscript, she'll see my heart bled onto every page. That's enough. I have nothing left to give her. Hours slip by. I don't sleep much, just stare at the ceiling, listening to the hum of traffic outside. Then dawn breaks. Pale light seeps around the curtains. A new day. I pick up my phone. 12 missed calls, half a dozen messages. I skim through them. Most are from her, some from neighbors. In one text, she begs me to come home. In another, she says she's leaving the house and can't take it anymore. Then a flurry of smaller messages. I'm sorry. I hate you. Where are you? The usual roller coaster of guilt, anger, desperation. I turn off the phone and toss it aside. My chest tightens with a swirl of emotions, but fear is not among them. The worst has happened, and I'm still standing. After a quick shower in the motel's cramped bathroom, I throw on fresh clothes. The reflection in the mirror shows a man who's had his illusions shattered. Yet, ironically, he looks more alive than he has in a long time. Stepping outside, I inhale the crisp morning air. The sky is streaked with orange and pink, as though the universe decided to give me a sliver of beauty after all this darkness. My mind drifts back to what I once feared the most, losing her. Now that I have, or will soon, I realize I'm not as broken as I imagined. I'm simply changed. I walk to my car, rest my hands on the hood. I think of how I used to cling to the idea of us, even when I knew the foundation was gone. Maybe that's what love does. It blinds you until you slam headfirst into reality. And once you do, you either collapse or you stand. I've chosen to stand. I open the trunk, see my suitcase. Then I glance back at the motel door. I feel the final vestiges of heartbreak swirl in my gut. But I let them pass. This is my life now. Unpredictable, painful, and undeniably mine to shape. In the hush of this new morning, I allow myself a small bitter smile. Sometimes, when you lose the thing you believed was your anchor, you discover you're capable of sailing on your own. Maybe she'll try to come back. Maybe she won't. Maybe Marco will fade into the background or cling to her in desperation. It doesn't matter. My fear is gone, burnt up in that raging fire of betrayal. There's a scar in its place, a scar that reminds me how easily love can turn to heartbreak. But that scar also reminds me I survived. I'll heal. I'll keep writing, keep living, keep breathing. As I pull out of the parking lot, heading nowhere in particular, I realize the final irony. She always thought I was too distant, too quiet, too wrapped up in my own world. But in the end, my silence was the shield that allowed me to endure her betrayal. She tried to hide behind sweet words like "my dear," but those words were never meant for me anymore. She might have shattered my trust, but she only sharpened my resolve. And so, as the sun climbs higher, I drive onward, leaving that motel behind. I feel the tension unwinding in my shoulders, replaced by a cautious sense of relief. Maybe it's true what they say, that when you lose what you thought was most important, fear disappears, and with it, she disappears too. I don't know if my heart can fully make sense of that yet, but at least I'm finally free to find out.